911 Big 550 KTRS. The board meeting is in session. House Majority Leader John Diehl, who is looking more svelte every day. Good morning, John Diehl.
Good morning, McGraw.
Also with us, filmmaker, St. Louis attorney, all-around gadfly, Jay Kanzler, who's filling in for Tony Messenger. Good morning, Jay Kanzler.
Good morning, Dahl.
And attorney, former chief of staff to Governor Holden, all-around sweetheart for the most part. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Dueker.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? First, let's start with New York Times yesterday, front page story. New York Times writes about our lovely city of St. Louis. The headline reads, "In places like North St. Louis, gunfire still rules the night." It has a picture of St. Louis, which makes it look like the bayou after Hurricane Katrina, and it details the homicide rate. And in the 27th Ward in St. Louis, there were 17 murders last year, up from 5 in 2009. Even as citywide homicides drop, North St. Louis continues to be a crime-ridden area, all for the United States to read in this front page story of the New York Times. I do not necessarily, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not a guy who looks at this and says, "Oh, that's bad for St. Louis." This article is really bad for St. Louis.
It made us look like Detroit.
Yeah,
It did.
It did. It was
Absolutely.
really bad. And the unfortunate thing is, it's true. So there's no real, it wasn't a hatchet job. It wasn't looking to stick it to St. Louis. Unfortunately, it's all true.
Well, yeah, it is. But sometimes context matters. And, the difficulty is what high percentage of crime occurs in such a small part of, the metropolitan area. And so, I think it's important that this discussion happen, but I also think it's important that we remember there is a context, and most metro areas are, looked at differently than we are, and so I do have a little bit of issue with that, but we do have an area in North St. Louis that is generating a lot of the crime, and it's something that has to be addressed.
Yeah, we need to keep in mind that a ward in the city of St. Louis is about 10,000 people,
Right.
plus or minus. So my guess would be you could go into just about any major urban area in this country and find a pocket where there are 10,000 people that are living, draw some type of line or circle around it, and find some really, really bad things and bad crime statistics. You can do that to Chicago. You can do that to New York, Washington, D.C.,
Right.
Anywhere. But St. Louis has a statistical problem because our denominator is just so low, and people think of St. Louis as being the city of St. Louis when in reality it's a much bigger pie. And when you look at crime statistics overall in the St. Louis metropolitan area, they are way down in the 30s and 40s are some of the numbers I see. So we need to fix our statistical problem.
Jay Kanzler.
Disagree with John, respectfully, and Jane. I was looking at the Post-Dispatch online over the weekend with my daughter, and she pointed to something. It was the murder map that they occasionally run.
Right.
And it is not a pocket up in North St. Louis. It runs from North County, comes down through North St. Louis, through the city of St. Louis, and then down into South City. And it made this amazing, colorful little winding array of those dots. And she said, "What are those things?" Those are murders. It's not. The article, I think, did us a favor in some respects because it seemed in the article that it was just Antonio French's ward up there. It's a bigger problem than that. So to talk about it as just statistics, saying, well, if we spread it out over a bigger area, it goes down, and that's fine. I agree with that. Most places in St. Louis are very safe. We have a serious problem. I go up there all the time into those areas because I have clients and friends and churches, and it is dangerous, and they're afraid up there. And I applaud Chief Dotson for what they're doing, but we have to be more creative, more aggressive in these areas to reduce the crime. This isn't statistics. These are people being killed.
Okay, but here's the interesting thing about all of this. Let's get to the why, okay? I get that there are trouble spots and so on and so forth and broken families and everything, and lack of jobs and whatever else. But this isn't just random crimes. These are crimes on crime, meaning one drug dealer is shooting another drug dealer. This guy wants the corner. That guy has the corner. You're moving in on my turf. All of a sudden, now I'm high. You look to have my girlfriend wrong. I've got a gun. I shoot you. These are all real problems in which it's never going to change because there's going to be a segment of society that always goes for the illegal drug use. And if you tie those crimes and those murders with that murder map, and you say how many are directly related somehow to the illegal drug trade and or high on these drugs, you'll see that 98% of them are all somehow connected to illegal drug use.
They're drug gang wars
Right.
is what they are. And there are ways to police that. Other cities have done that. You're right. You're never going to get rid of the drug problem or people being addicted to drugs. You can try to mitigate that or make it better, but on the crime aspect of it, it's putting boots on the street.
Right.
Okay. Break
Anybody,
up the corners.
Anybody in favor of legalizing drugs? Because if you legalize the drugs and regulate the drugs, all of that crime goes away.
Well, I mean, and I've heard people on your show before talking about this.
You haven't just heard people.
Right.
You've heard
law enforcement.
Law enforcement, judges, prosecutors,
Right.
DEA agents who have retired, who have created this
Who've
organization
worked in the war on crime.
that are saying that's right. Front lines who are now saying the war on crime is a joke and we need to legalize it and regulate it, and the crime will plummet.
War on drugs, not the war on crime.
The war on
Right.
drugs.
War on
right.
drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't see a problem with, and it made me think. It really did. It made me think. Hearing them speak really made me think because you can look at it in a judgmental way. I hate drugs. Or you can look at it in a practical way. And that's sort of the fight and the tension that you're having right now.
We're war on drugs, and there's a major
Right.
heroin epidemic going on here in the St. Louis metropolitan
Right.
area.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think it's worth trying. I mean, and so where I sort of came down after all was said and done was, you know what? We ought to look seriously at legalizing pot and see how it does. And to see whether this supposition, because we don't know.
The majority of Americans are in favor of legalizing marijuana.
I understand, but I mean, I'm thinking about what law enforcement. I would like to test that theory. I don't want to do it with heroin. I don't want to do it with everything
I'll say
else.
I don't think these are
But-
marijuana dealers that are
No,
shooting
but I
each
do
other.
think that you could get some very good data to see whether there is an effect by legalizing. And I think that's a safer route than saying, okay, we're just going to throw away, everything.
It worked with alcohol. I mean, alcohol had gang
prohibition,
wars.
I understand, and prohibition is somewhat of an indicator. And so that's why I think it wouldn't be a bad approach to try. And you're talking about creative things in very difficult situations. And so, that's sort of where I came down on that. And it would be an interesting experiment to see whether it would decrease crime and would decrease sort of these gang wars and other things.
John Diehl, do you ever see a time where the state of Missouri would somehow legalize marijuana, at least to test?
I don't think so. No, and you use the example of prohibition and alcohol, and you're right. There were gang wars over that, but then it moves to the illegal drugs.
Mhm.
Okay, and then you legalize certain drugs, and the trade is going to move to other drugs which are not legal, which will then become cheaper and more plentiful. So you may legalize heroin, and the theory behind it is that it gets more expensive. It's regulated, and you collect
tax
tax
it
revenue
and
off it and all that.
regulate it, right.
But then the trade all moves to meth.
Right.
Well, then you legalize meth, and then the trade moves to something else and something else and something else. The problem that the problem that we have, I think, in these areas is a breakdown of family units, and I don't want to use the term family values,
Right.
but we see it reflected in the schools. We see it reflected in things like this, and you see it reflected in the prison system. When you don't have family structures, kids don't survive in school, and when they don't survive in school, they're on the streets.
But it's
doing stuff like that.
multifaceted.
But it's easier to get a marijuana cigarette than it is to get a regular cigarette.
It's easier to.
The
and
kid
cheaper.
walking by your kid's locker is a pharmacy of heroin, of meth,
Right.
of cocaine, of crack, of everything.
It's cheaper to get heroin than pot now.
It's
That is-
easier
and
to
it's
get
easier.
heroin and pot and cocaine than it is to get alcohol and cigarettes.
And,
Jake,
and that's a problem.
Jake, last comment here for you.
I think some of that data we will be getting soon because certain states are legalizing marijuana.
That's true. That will
And
happen.
we'll
I agree.
see. I don't see it in Missouri. I have kind of come around on this issue to realize that the war on drugs has been a disaster. And I think Bill McClellan had a great article the other day, a piece about a man who's doing life in prison. I think it was for a kilo of marijuana. We have prison overcrowding. We have other issues that are we going to solve the entire problem? No. Do we legalize all the drugs? No. But I think this idea of putting people in prison for 10 years for, a pound of marijuana, those days have to end.
Jay Kanzler should think about running for office one of these days. St. Louis attorney, filmmaker Jay Kanzler, John Diehl, House Majority Leader Jane Dueker, back board meeting on the Big 550. House Majority Leader John Diehl, Jay Kanzler, local attorney, and Jane Dueker, former chief of staff to Governor Holden. It's the board meeting. It's Thursday. It can be seen in its entirety at stltoday.com. Before we get to the next topic, let me change your people's world here. Let me do you a favor and rock your world. You need a lunch spot. Anybody been to Piccadilly's at Manhattan Cafe?
I have not.
No.
It is in South City, right where South City and Shrewsbury and that Maplewood sort of come together there. It's at the corner of Piccadilly and Manhattan, hence the name Piccadilly and Manhattan.
I have been there.
It is the sweetest, nicest cafe, the sweetest, nicest people. It is the food was off the charts yesterday.
What kind of food?
It's regular. They have chicken wings and they have a pulled pork toast. They have a pulled pork ravioli, which they're known for. It's they sold their house, redid this Piccadilly at Manhattan. They live upstairs and it's their home. So they're not inviting you to their restaurant. They're inviting you into their home.
Oh, that's
Kind of old
nice.
style where people lived
That's
above
exactly right. Yeah. They have a
worked,
back patio that's open, and it is fantastic.
How new?
It's been open about six years. I've been there a
Wow.
couple times, but I was there yesterday. This is unsolicited, so this is just if you want a place to go for dinner, lunch, hang out, maybe a big corporate meeting, maybe a big political meeting. Maybe you're trying to sue somebody.
I'll get all those Republicans in the city. To
That's
all
exactly
together.
right.
Piccadilly's on Manhattan.
Yeah, there you go.
All four of them.
Right there on the corner of Manhattan and
They'll fit.
Piccadilly, hence the name Piccadilly at Manhattan. You can't miss it. All right, let's get to our next topic, the city-county merger. Jane Dueker, some news this week. There is a group started that's called, what's it called?
Better Together.
Better Together, which connotes that maybe they're in favor of joining the city and the county. But
It appears, yeah.
they're going to look at the idea and ask for public input on merging the city with the county.
Well, I mean, and I think this is probably the beginning of a very long conversation. And so I think one thing that I am glad about is that they're going to actually do some sort of public-style hearings where we hear things about, levels of bureaucracy and areas that need to be looked at as far as governmental efficiency and whatnot. And so I think that conversation has to happen. I mean, this has been floating around. I think the chatter about it is more heightened in the city because I think that's where this movement is emanating from. And I think, but I think county residents are starting to, finally become engaged, and they should. And I think I was also heartened by the fact that it looks like that they're not going to try a ballot initiative maybe until 2016 instead of,
Until they try and sell it a little bit better.
Well, and I think one of the issues is that some people are starting to talk about is this going to be a statewide vote, or does the county get a vote, which is the way the Constitution is now? And will that provision be overturned to
So the
say,
county would have to vote in favor and the city would have to vote in favor.
the way the Constitution reads now, the Missouri Constitution. But if somebody were going to do a ballot initiative to overturn that and say, look, we're going to send it to a statewide vote, I think the dynamic is obviously far different.
Isn't the rule of thumb or the general consensus is that the city would like to merge with the county, but the county residents don't want to hang out with the city residents?
I mean, I don't know that to be true. I think there's a lot of people who think that, we ought to be looking at efficiencies. I think there's a lot of people on the spectrum. I think there are people who are like merger, merger, merger. I think there are people like no, no, no. And then I think there's a lot of people in the middle that say, we need to look at this from sort of a fact-based, perspective and say, okay, what about this would work? Would there be, and there's no proposal out there yet. And that makes it difficult too because, you have to evaluate something.
Right.
And so I think that's a challenge.
So what is the public, John Diehl, commenting on if there's no deal out there?
Well, that'll be interesting, but I would anticipate what they're probably going to do, or hopefully they will do, is to lay out topics that need to be addressed.
Right.
So if you're going to deal with something like this, it's nice to talk about statistics, which
Right.
we just talked about in our last segment,
Taxation,
as a reason to do
you
that.
know, layers
But-
of government.
But the heavy lifting on stuff like this are going to be, pensions, court systems,
Right.
prosecuting attorneys, assessors' offices, collections, police.
Tax.
Municipal services.
Right.
Is the county going to stay in the
Streets.
municipal services business, or are they just going to be in the county business? So those are the heavy. Right now, if you go in, the largest municipal service provider in St. Louis County is St. Louis County, with all the unincorporated areas.
Mm-hmm.
So is the county going to stay in the municipal services business,
Well, and
or
the
are
city
they?
does services. They do trash. They do. I mean, there's a lot
but the city does county
Right.
services within
Right.
the city.
Right.
So is the city going to get out of the county business? Is the county going to get out of the city business? And
a lot of layers there.
so I do commend them. And one thing we talked about this show over the past couple months, if you're going to roll something out
Right.
like this, go public
That's right.
with it.
Be transparent.
Do it out. Do it out in the open. So I commend the group for getting out in the open and doing it. They claim to have no preconceived notions on what this has to look like in the end, and I think we'll just stay tuned.
Jay
Yeah.
Kanzler?
Well, I agree. It's wonderful that they're having the conversation. I'm so glad that my friend and genuine public servant, Ambassador Walker, is part of the group. I think he will lend a lot of credibility to it. I think the chances of this ever happening, probably in my lifetime, are slim to none. I mean, the only way I see it ever happening is if they do so stack the deck against a county vote on this, that somehow it could happen. It all depends on what is your definition of merger.
Right.
And I think that's where, all the devil is in the details. Is there a problem with combining some services and leaving other services to the independent entities? In St. Louis County, what do we have, 130 municipalities within St. Louis County that duplicate services upon services? To the extent that we can improve our living conditions and save some money, I'm all for that.
But nobody calls up and says in the dark corners of St. Louis County, they don't complain that, oh my goodness, somebody from the city might pick up my garbage, right? They're afraid that some nameless, faceless bad guy is going to be merged with the county, and all of a sudden, instead of robbing the guy on Washington Avenue, I'm going to rob the woman in Clayton because now the city and the county have merged. So it's a ridiculous thing people are afraid of.
Oh, I'm sure there's some paranoia out there, and that's not going to change.
I think one of the bigger fears, and this is a process which will play out, is whether or not there are unfunded liabilities,
Right.
such
The
as
debt.
pensions and debt and other things on either side of that ledger,
Right.
okay, that one side or the other is going to have to take on. I think that's the
crux of it.
Well, and listen
the
here,
big
St.
deal.
Louis County is not like Nirvana right now. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, when you want to talk about getting in and getting efficient, all the layers of government in St. Louis County, all the municipalities, the stuff
Not to
we're
mention
reading.
you have to pay for all the graft and everything going on,
Well, I mean,
and all
it's-
the money
it-
flying out
That's
the door.
not cheap.
St. Louis,
That is expensive.
That's expensive, yeah. But I mean,
lightens your load around Christmas time.
yeah.
Huh?
So I mean, so
Where'd my
I
wallet
hope
go?
Yeah.
I hope that part of the aim of this group is to say, okay, it's not just the city that has issues. I mean, the county has a lot of cleaning up, a lot of efficiencies, a lot of things that it needs to do. And I want to make sure that we stay focused on that as well.
What
that we
happens to
clean it up before
to
we-
the 1% earnings tax in the city? Does
If
that
they
go
merge,
away?
Depending on how they do it,
Depending on how they do it.
depending on how they do it, they could get rid of it because the way and I think that's part of the goal. I mean, don't be mistaken. I think that's part of the deal.
Right.
And so I think if depending on how they legally do it, the law provides that once you lose your earnings tax, the people who already had it were grandfathered, i.e., the city of St. Louis,
Right.
and they have to re-sunset it every 5 years, I think, and it's coming up on the next sunset.
But once you lose it, you don't
But
get it
once
back.
you lose it, you don't get it back without a vote of the people.
Right.
And so I do think that that has the dual purpose of
So
sort
the
of taking
goal
care of that.
would be merge them together, and that 1% would go away.
And efficiencies would likely replace that
And I think, too,
revenue.
when we look at this, that there are a lot of things that are already consolidated
Right, they
between
just
the
did
two.
economic development.
Well, but let's look broader than that. MSD,
Mhm.
the Zoo Park District, Metro.
Airport.
Right.
No, the airport actually, right?
But don't they have county? I mean, there is.
They have some, but we
participation.
probably, maybe it ends up with the regional airport
Right.
authority or something like that. So I'm going to take them at their word at this point that they're looking at it with an open mind, and just let's stay tuned on it.
That's John Diehl, House Majority Leader, Speaker in waiting in the House. Jay Kanzler's with us. Jane Dueker also here. The state of Missouri executed a man who was on death row for over 30 years. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Big
McGraw
550.
live in the morning on KTRS. This hour is presented by Weber Chevrolet, with 4 locations to serve you. Online at weberchevrolet.com.
We would call the show the Roundtable, but Frank Cusimano's been using that for years, so we certainly don't want to offend our good friend on the other side of the dial, Frank Cusimano. So we're calling it the board meeting. It's House Majority Leader John Diehl, Jay Kanzler filling in for editorial page editor Tony Messenger, and Jane Dueker, former Chief of Staff of Governor Holden, attorney and all-around good person. Say hi to your mom for me.
Hi, Mom.
My mom's the best. All right. Jay Kanzler, the state of Missouri executed Joseph Franklin this week in a much talked about for all sorts of reasons. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, although I've been outspoken here in favor of the death penalty, certainly there's nothing to celebrate anytime someone is put to death.
Right.
Anytime someone dies, it is sad, but the state of Missouri did the right thing in moving forward with the death penalty. The legal wrangling that went on, the federal district court judges who stayed the execution, you're always going to find people that are unwilling to, let the matter move on. And I think the Court of Appeals, the Eighth Circuit, and the U.S. Supreme Court did the right thing, which leads to kind of the article today in the paper where John Simon, a member of Mr. Franklin's legal team, who I know and respect a great deal, is saying this argument is not over. We are going to continue attacking the protocol, that is, the process in which we put these people to death. And I think, for the benefit of everyone, that's where the focus needs to be in Jefferson City right now, is do we have a process in place that will withstand the last-minute judicial attacks that go on, which are no good for the victims' families, which are no good for the convicted person's family, no good for anyone. We need to concentrate on that.
Can I ask you, Steve? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the circus at the end of these things, where the focus is all on the defendant and how that person's actually going to be put to death, and 24, 48 hours before. My gosh, think what that does to the victims' families. These poor people finally have some closure to this, and to think that they're not reliving what happened to their family over and over and over again every time this happens. It's just it's really pretty outrageous. And one of the last appeals that was filed, where the complaint was that because the drug was created by a compound pharmacy, there are studies out there showing that some compound pharmacies have been charged or sued because people get bacterial infections from the drugs which are administered to them. That's just outrageous. That's not even a good faith argument.
we should note that some victims are in favor of the execution. Other victims are not in favor of the execution. So it's sort of, you're ripping apart both sides of the aisle there.
Well, but whether they're, and I've never been in this position, so I apologize in advance if I say something which is insensitive. But I can't imagine that the people who are opposed to the execution, go through the same emotional roller coaster that maybe the other families that want to see this happen.
I think it's both sides, because if you're fighting, if you're against it, and you're ready for it, you're not ready for it.
Right.
It's a stay. I agree with you. It is
right.
a circus. It is a total circus.
Well,
Jane.
and that's the thing is, as I indicated last time we were here and on this topic, I presided over my first day in the governor's office, presided over an execution, and it was by far the most harrowing thing I've ever done in my career, and likely will ever be. And it's awful. Even in the best of circumstances, when you don't have these issues, it is an awful, awful thing. And it's and there you have the victim's family. And you know what? There's always going to be another side. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to say it, defendants and defendants' families and the society, everybody has an interest in this process. And the key is to always balance all of that stuff to get justice. And it's never, justice is never perfect. But what I think that this process of the end of filing appeals, it happens with every execution. It's not new.
Right.
It's and that's never going to stop. So the best way to prevent the circus from getting worse is to reduce the variables, meaning get your protocol in order. One of the judges that stayed the execution stayed it for the sole reason of your protocol keeps moving targets. We have a legal obligation to determine whether it satisfies constitutional standards, and the target keeps moving. Well, that introduces uncertainty into the process and makes it that much harder. Now, the state's been put in a horrible position, with lots of different circumstances leading up to that. But they've got to get a protocol or more than one protocol in place and get it done and reduce the variables.
I want to ask a stupid question here. 60 Minutes did a piece on Jack Kevorkian, and he created a machine that very peacefully put people to death who wanted to die because they were in last stages of whatever disease they were in. He went to jail because he killed these people in a very peaceful way. Why can't we use that machine to execute these people?
Well, but drug companies aren't preventing him from getting the drug. I mean, we have a problem here because the certain drugs we want to use, we now have the international and national community and pharmacies and whatever, refusing to give the drug because they don't want to be part of an execution. So the state has been put in a terrible position because the drugs that you would want to use are no longer available.
Are other states having this same problem executing their condemned?
I think it goes state by state, but yeah, and some states have alternatives. I mean, the electric chair or gas chamber, there are other alternatives, and the state of Missouri has sort of abandoned those because, we've used the lethal injection. But, I mean, I think something that has to be explored is having contingencies in place so that, you don't create the uncertainty in the courts and elsewhere surrounding the procedure, which is the protocol.
John Diehl, John Diehl, do you see a time if the state would go back to a gas chamber or the electric chair?
Well, I think we need to go back and look at what the protocols are that have been established in other states that have been upheld by the federal courts and the Supreme Court as something to stop the circus that goes on at the very end. I agree that this particular time with, what's the name of the drug? Is it
propofol was the one that was sort of
was
This
being
is
used.
phenobarbital or whatever.
It kind of got yanked by the
and that
drug
was-
manufacturers at the end, so probably this one was messy in that regard. But now that we know what those issues are, I think the department and the executive branch needs to get some pretty clear protocols set up for future ones.
Jay?
I was just going to say, I think that this execution went off, and apparently what was supposed to happen did happen. He took a few breaths, he stopped breathing, he died. This particular protocol of this particular compounded drug is used in other states. It was obviously effective in this particular instance.
Nobody's making the claim that it creates some type of pain. No one was making that argument. I mean,
Well, they're always
they're always
like that.
complaining that.
Yeah.
They're always saying that because you don't know.
That's the basis of their claim.
And that's silly. I mean, I'll just go out and say it. It's silly. And, you're putting someone to death.
We do go to extraordinary lengths to execute somebody as peacefully as possible. It's a pretty bizarre situation we find ourselves in.
But I also am proud that Missouri has never been considered a state that executed innocent people. And I think that having been in that
Well, there aren't
state,
too many states that have lay claim to that.
Well, no, I think you would be surprised. I think that if you talk to the opponents, they will tell you. But Missouri never gets a bad rap, and there's a reason for that. In Missouri, I believe the prosecutors and the people who administer it here in Missouri are judicious. They don't throw it around for every crime. They pick the cases very carefully, and I think Missouri has done a very good job. And I'm glad, because if we're going to do this,
I don't know, because I've
right.
never been allowed to see it, so I don't know if they do a good job
Well,
or
and
not.
I'm going to petition that you never can.
That's Jane Dueker, Jay Kanzler, John Diehl. We'll come back. Parting shots on the board meeting in a moment. The Big 550 KTRS.
The Big 550 is your home for
All right,
everything
the
Mizzou.
three of you, Jay Kanzler, John Diehl, and Jane Dueker, you are absolved from your board meeting duties for next week. Before we run out of time, I want to wish each and every one of you a happy Thanksgiving dinner.
And a happy birthday to me.
And a happy birthday to you. You're going to be
26?
26 again.
No, 29.
29
Thanks.
again.
Yeah, 29. Yeah.
29
Your
again.
Thanksgiving birthday?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no,
Very
it's the 26th, but every 7 years or so it's on Thanksgiving.
Oh, isn't that nice?
It is
call.
nice. You can thank my mom again.
And so you're busy cooking the bird in the kitchen?
No, I get to just make a dessert and go to my aunt, who's the most phenomenal cook on the planet. So, yeah.
All right, good.
it's
So
all good.
we will reconvene in 2 weeks. Here's my parting shot. One, make sure you're going to go to Piccadilly at Manhattan. Where is it? Right on the corner of Manhattan and Piccadilly.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, yesterday, the state of Illinois, a state senator from Illinois, a Republican state senator from Illinois, wants to change the law in Illinois that makes it now, or will change the law so that you can sell cars on Sundays in the state of Illinois. Did you see this
Blasphemy.
story?
Okay.
Because it's now against the law to sell car dealers are closed on Sundays. And every car dealer I know loves it because they get to spend Sunday with their families because they're open six days a week. Now this Illinois senator says it's unfair business practices. Leave the car dealerships alone. They're not screaming and yelling to be open on Sundays. They don't want to be open on Sundays because if they have to, then it's just taking time away from their family. So I'm standing up for all the car dealers there. Leave them alone. Don't change anything.
That is, I can't believe, I mean, for us St. Louis natives, the blue law, remember? They were called blue laws in Missouri, and it might have been before you got here where everything was closed on Sunday, and, and people were violated, and we need to, people need to make money, and it's just amazing how the cycle comes back around, that now people are saying, you know what, if you have stuff closed on Sunday, then people can spend time with their families, and it's just really amazing that this cycle is coming back. In my lifetime,
But I
about
think the
blue
car
laws.
dealerships don't want it open.
Car dealerships aren't open here on Sundays either.
But it's not
I
because of
believe.
law, I don't think.
I think it is a
it's-
law.
In Missouri?
Yeah.
I thought the blue laws.
I
were
know. I know
legal.
it's at least by custom. I
Right.
know that
I don't know
they
if
all
it's-
have that. But what happens if they start opening on Sunday in Illinois now? They're gonna have to open here.
Right, right.
And a car is not the type of thing that you're not going to buy
Right.
because you can't go do it on a Sunday.
Right.
Right.
Unlike milk, bread, or eggs that you sort of need or whatever else, or you only have 2 days a week to shop for your TV, so you can go buy a new TV on a Sunday or something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. All right. What was that little?
Oh, I just
snide
think it's sort of
comment?
How about
interesting
that?
that where does that end then? If we're either free market or we're not.
Well, the question is, can you sue people on a Sunday?
No, you can't.
You can't sue anybody.
Well,
on a
actually,
Sunday.
technically,
You
the
can.
courts-
You'll figure out a way to sue someone on a
Technically, the
Sunday.
courts are open at all times, but I don't know that you'll find anybody to take the
I
filing.
want a trial on Sunday.
There you go.
I want to be able to see that trial. We should get our cameras allowed in there. That's John Diehl, House Majority Leader John Diehl, who is losing weight, looking good. You slimming down for the speakership?
I'm trying to more, just on a more serious note. A good friend of mine that's in the General Assembly, had a stroke over the summer, my age. Just kind of a wake-up call.
All right,
it's
good.
something you need to get in shape, stay in shape, watch what you eat.
There you go. Good.
Go Fitbit.
Jay Kanzler is attorney and star filmmaker. Jay, we can see 23 Minutes to Sunrise where?
iTunes, Google Pay, Netflix.
And we can
Come over to my house.
And we can download it.
Party at Kanzler's.
We can download it illegally at all those fine reputable
illegally in all the
places.
European websites. And by the way, I just wanted to say that my insurance is still canceled. Thank you, President Obama. And the notice I got said that if I want to reapply more quickly, I should go to healthcare.gov.
That is a photobomb. A tout à l'heure.